Ladies and gentlemen, I have received a donation with a request for possibly some Democracy in America by Tocqueville, which I did mention. So we are going to begin with that. I have here a cute little version of the book, edited and abridged by Richard D. Hefner. And we're going to start with the introduction by the abridger, so that going into De Tocqueville's material, we won't be completely blind. We'll know a little bit about what's going on. Alexis De Tocqueville arrived in the U.S. in May 1831 and departed its shores back for his native France again in February 1832, only 9 months later. So he spent 9 months here. 1831, that's 30 years before the Civil War begins. That's about 5 years after the invention of the first steam locomotives, which were originally used only in Britain. I don't know. I think we had track and train in America by 1830. I'm not certain of that, though. Certainly, sometime right around then we did get it. So that gives you an idea of what was going on in the nation at the time. Slavery was still around. Trains were just coming into use. We skip a little bit. This book was first published, Democracy in America, was first published in 1835, and then again in 1840. Still worth a read. We skip a couple pages. Tocqueville wrote, "I know of no country in which there is so little independence of mind and real freedom of discussion as in America." End quote. Now that is a very fascinating thing for him to say if we compare it to our own day and age. I know from several different very intelligent people that Europe today is the exact Europe would suffer this criticism from Tocqueville today. America would not. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Mark Stein, Christopher Hitchens, particularly Ayaan Hirsi Ali, said that the conversation in America strikes her as much more honest. There are more views in play. There are more people willing to say what they think, instead of everybody just with one monolithic view. You know, in Europe the view is, we have to be nice to the Muslims. That's the end of the conversation. And if there's a suicide bombing or something, then we say, well, we don't need to target all Muslims, it's only some Muslims, and that's just, you know, it's the tone of the conversation. There's nothing honest being said. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali said, "I thought when I came to America, everybody would have guns, they would all be fat, and, you know, a couple other things." And she said, it's not true at all. It's not true at all. America's a great place, and there's more freedom of discussion going on here than in Europe, absolutely. We skip a little bit below from that. He was born in Paris in 1805. Now that makes him about 26 or so when he came to America, so sort of young. Now you may know that from the 1790s up into the early 1800s, France was in turmoil. That was the time of Napoleon's conquests, or whatever you want to call them. Quote, "During the Revolution, his parents had been jailed. His maternal grandfather, the Marquis of Rosambo, had been guillotined in the name of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And though his father was ultimately returned to rank and position after the fall of Napoleon, Tocqueville's own childhood had been overshadowed by memories of these earlier popular excesses. In so many ways, then, he was both by birth and circumstance ideally suited to the role of hostile critic of democracy in America." So, coming from a country where the mob had done so much damage, not just to the country, but to his own family, so he's got a dog in the fight, so to speak, he was primed to be a critic of America, but it turns out he wasn't completely critical of everything he found. We skip a little ways down. Though Tocqueville never abandoned what he considered the loftier ideals and values of his aristocratic heritage, still his lively instinct for fairness and justice had touched off in him an enormous sympathy for democratic ideals. So even though he'd seen France bungle it, he knew there's something in democracy. And he talks a little bit later about revolutions and how democracies are bound to have less of them and the reasons for that. So he understood that democracy was a good way to go, even if it could be bungled in some respects. I will just say, he calls it democracy in America. It's a widespread myth. It's been going on a long, long time. Democracy was used by our founding fathers as a derogatory term for mob rule. They, when the constitutional what was it called, Constitutional Convention ended, a lady, an old woman, asked Benjamin Franklin, "Sir, what have you wrought?" And Franklin said, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." And that's true. We don't have a democracy because we cannot just majority vote any goddamn thing we want. We are limited by the Constitution. So this is a republic wherein people represent the people in government. Okay? You and I don't go sit and vote on how much we're going to spend on roads. That's what democracy is. That's where citizens vote on everything. Here, citizens vote on who gets to go sit and vote and listen to stuff. That's a republic, and we're limited by a constitution. So it's just, it's either romanticism or it's just accepting the critical ways of speaking about democracy, because it is a synonym for mob rule. To call America a democracy today, we're not. We're a constitutional republic. Alright, now we skip a little bit. Tocqueville was coming to America ostensibly, meaning the obvious reason you could point to, there can be no argument, he was ostensibly coming here to study our jail system. Actually, quote, Tocqueville and Beaumont came primarily because of their intense eagerness to examine democracy at first hand, to see for themselves the actual workings of those equalitarian democratic doctrines that must ultimately be France's destiny. So they believed France was on the way to it, and indeed Tocqueville thought generally it was going to be a growing trend for humanity, and they wanted to come see the country that seems to have been making a go at it, seems to have been working it out. Democracy would inevitably come to their beloved France and to the rest of the world, but if these two young men could detect its errors and shortcomings in America, then at home in France they might at least prepare adequate safeguards for the inevitable. As Tocqueville himself wrote, quote from Tocqueville, "It is not then merely to satisfy a legitimate curiosity that I have examined America. My wish has been to find there instruction by which we may ourselves profit." So they come here to learn something about it. "I confess that in America I saw more than America. I sought there the image of democracy itself, with its inclinations, character, prejudices, passions, in order to learn what we have to fear or to hope from its progress." So he didn't come to see America, he came to see democracy. Now we skip down a bit. No way to segue, we're just going to go to an interesting tidbit. To Tocqueville, the American presidency seemed to be almost an office without power. He described at length the forces that enfeebled the chief executive and seriously limited his influence. Wouldn't that be nice? Now, to be fair, the chief executive to this day is basically without power as far as internal affairs go inside the nation. He is beholden to Congress, and he can't just do any old thing he wants. But he has enormous powers on the world stage. The chief executive has almost unlimited powers as far as, I mean, he can start wars without asking anybody. So this is actually something that Tocqueville noticed. And we'll get to a little bit of that just a little ways down. First, though, he did see that America was continuing to grow, and he thought it would continue to grow. Quote, "In time he felt that there might be as many as 100 million Americans in 40 states, and the disintegrating, decentralizing effect of such growth and expansion would mean a further weakening of the bonds of the Union." Now, when he came here in 1830, the Union was pulling this way and that way. There was the East Coast, there were the people going out towards the West and the Mississippi and Valley and stuff. Then there was the North, which was mostly industrial and largely had illegalized slavery or limited it, and the South, which thrived on slavery. So the country was torn in 4 directions just on those 2 issues. And so he saw it as it's just going to be torn more and more, and it's going to get bigger and bigger.